So I want to talk to you about keeping the allergic customers safe and a view from the food service sector. I am a humble food and service operator that takes a responsibility of keeping people safe in the work in a food service environment. I've got an agenda of 3 themes today. So there's an element about the statistics, the sobering statistics about where we are with fatalities around anaphylaxis and where food service sits in that. How are we doing as an industry? And also, I think what we're really looking to do as the Anaphylaxis Campaign and the collective food industry is really improve the education and awareness, because at the end of the day, as things we find from the very first piece that Lynn showed this morning, it is all about confidence. It's confidence from the operator's perspective, it's confidence from the customer's perspective, and I think that is what everybody is seeking for in order to be able to deal with this very tricky issue. But before I start, just make sure everyone's not asleep, has anybody here either themselves or witnessed someone in their care, a child perhaps, a friend, experienced an anaphylactic reaction? Don't show your hands yet. Or is there anyone here with the operators in the room, with the operator's hat on, that has had a customer have an anaphylactic reaction happen before your eyes? I won't put anybody on the spot or ask anybody any questions as to who's putting their hand up for what respective situation, but it'd just be good to know how many people there are here that have had that. Okay. So this is my daughter Ella, who's 14 now. She's anaphylactic and allergic to most nuts. And as a parent, I am been constantly focused throughout her life that she takes appropriate care with food, especially when dining away from home, which is now more common. She's 14, this was a few years ago. This is her with a gather apron doing a nut-free cupcake. This isn't slave labour that we have at in our business, but it's something that we used as part of our promotion around getting the message out around our business. So my day job is managing the operations for a national catering business, Gather, and we serve many millions of meals in the workplace. And my team, a few of them here today, and I take responsibility in keeping the many people safe who dine with me daily, sometimes multiple times. I'm delighted that Hazel Gowland is still with us after lunch. And again, it's always this sense of slight neurosis when you are feeding people with allergies in a food service environment that lives with you. When we discovered that Ella's allergy when she was 1, it was November 14. We were living in Australia at the time. It really changed the whole family life and the whole family dynamic. That change also impacted everybody who came in contact with Ella. And that involves childcare centres, involves airlines, it involves restaurants. And as a parent, you do inevitably become, JP, I'm sure you can agree, neurotic about this. And at that time in Australia, the actual labelling, food labelling, was not particularly good. And at the time, it feels quite isolating, quite a distressing situation that you are constantly in. And actually, it never really goes away. You just learn to manage it as a parent. Fair to say we had some fantastic support with a similar sister organisation in Australia, similar to the Anaphylaxis Campaign. And I think the real impact for me is once we got over Ella's situation was actually then going back into the workplace. So I was working in food service in Australia. And it was really for the first time in my 15 years of being professionally involved in food did I really get it, that actually if you don't get it right in food service, it can have catastrophic consequences, not just for the person, but for the whole team and everybody that is experienced around that situation. As a result of being in obviously this unique position of viewing allergy, the epidemic, because it is an epidemic that we are facing with the amount of more younger people and later onset that are coming through, I'm seeing on both sides of the fence. I felt with the EU law coming and being back in the UK, that I felt a calling to try and help the food industry, which has been very good to me. And I sort of joined the campaign in 2014 as a trustee to really try and help better arm the food industry, managing allergens in a robust but a pragmatic way. So the sobering statistics. This is what we know. So in terms of registers, etc., that sit around what we know of fatalities around anaphylaxis. And as you can see, that we've had a spike in 2017 of incidents, and especially fatalities, and it's only September that we're in, which is a really, again, quite a sobering thought. Most of the fatalities involve younger people. With every tragic incident, and most cases are avoidable either due to poor practices by the operator or the allergic customer not declaring their allergen at point of sale or not carrying their EpiPen with them. On top of these findings and a report survey that came out, I believe, from the FSA at some time, there was a survey that up to 25% of allergic consumers experience a reaction when dining out. We don't have the details about whether this is due to disclosed or undisclosed allergens, or whether allergens were present or through a may contain scenario. However, the number, I think you'll all agree, is worryingly high. And with growing numbers of young people with severe allergies and the emerging trend of people with later onset, good allergen management is not just a hygiene tick-the-box factor for food operators. It is absolutely critical to avoid those catastrophic issues that can impact a business and employees and a whole industry. So, in terms of how is the food industry doing, I think many of you were here last year when the QC Richard Wright talked us through almost what he described in his words as a perfect storm of negligence that led to the tragic death of Paul Wilson, which was an extreme example of what can go wrong. However, it does come back frequently to food service, takeaway, fast service restaurants. The hospitality sector and the industry, if we want to take a step back and understand, well, what is it? Well, we are the fourth ranking national industry around UK GDP. We have some 2.9 million people working within that industry that cover everything from motorway service stations, quick service restaurants, coffee shops, pubs, clubs, travel and leisure, healthcare and welfare, education, and workplace, which is the industry that I'm in, or business and industry, so it's mostly within corporate environments. So we did the food here today, and again, hope you enjoyed your lunch, which is where I spent most of my working life. And in our part of the industry alone, we employ over 900,000 people, which is 31% of the entire hospitality workforce. So we've talked very much today about manufacturing, and when I'm eating out with my daughter, I feel far more comfortable going to Sainsbury's or Tesco's or M&S and buying a curry on a Friday night, if that's what she fancies, than I do sometimes going into a food service. I always have this situation going on in my stomach if I'm going to somewhere new, and invariably I'm in the kitchen doing my own audit before we decide to eat. But the issue I find time and again is that people in our part of the industry just don't get it until it happens to them. And I suppose our question in all of this is sort of what needs to be done to help. So the industry needs to come together to help share best practice. And our collective reputation is relying on this. I think the food industry, when you look at what can be described as contracting, where there is competitive tendering for workplace, schools, hospital and public venues, is very competitive. We're not very good at sharing because we're all looking for this edge. Nobody wants any bad reputation. It's really encouraged to see that, in terms of Juliet putting Sainsbury's number of recalls coming back as, yep, this happens, and this is what we're doing about it, this is what we're dealing about it. We as an industry don't necessarily do that. But given it's a cyclical nature with the same clients, the same people working within our industry, that if we win one contract to another, the same team transfer over, it's actually in our best interest that we should, in my opinion, look to collaborate more and share not only the best practice around food safety and allergen management, so we can tackle what is real fundamental issue, not who's making the best coffee or the best sandwich. We need the established industry players to come together and help make a leadership position to help small and medium-sized enterprises, which is the very backbone of food innovation. So there's a side of us that's thinking about today, well, how do we get more operational, more systemized ways of delivering our food? We've got a consumer who is hungry for street food and pop-up and new concepts. And it's important that we, from a leadership perspective, take the best practice and help the small entrepreneurs and help their ideas and keep them safe. So we keep this constant fuel of innovation coming into the industry, but keeping people safe at the same time. I'm aware of some really good operators out there who have created allergen awareness and education films for their teams. They've taken real-life case studies that have happened in their business. They've had people actually starring in those who are the individuals that's had that actually happen to them on their watch. And they've explained what it's like to get it wrong for an allergic customer. Not that I've seen these films personally, but as an operator, I'm sure it's incredibly confronting, and it should be applauded. However, that kind of message we should be getting out more across the broader industry to understand that most people, unlike the gentleman that's now serving 6 years in prison, don't get out of bed every day to do the wrong thing with food service. We all get out of bed to do the right thing to try and make that work. So when we look at the food industry, about getting it, how do we make it work? Generally in our industry, things are pretty good. We have good health and safety departments. We have clients who demand that not only is health and safety and duty of care is written into our contracts, there's penalties or termination material breaches, and as a result, contractors are on the hook for compliance. However, compared to food manufacturing, which we've heard today in a lot of detail, and what sits behind that, the large food retailers, in terms of where we sit in food service, we're a long way behind manufacturing in terms of all the things we've touched on today around the things around threshold and may contain. This is due, I think, for me, for two reasons. The advanced way that manufacturing works is that, the menus don't change every day. You go on production lines and things will change less regularly. So it's easier in many ways to get the standard and the process correct. And the food industry, including independent restaurants, takeaway and pubs, we have a risk that's inherent in our operating model. Every day, fresh food is purchased, prepared, stored and served in an environment where cross-contamination has a much higher risk of occurring. Also, and importantly, menus and specifications will change, e.g. the daily special, given the well-documented issues of skilled chef shortages, varying capabilities of operators, often in tough commercial conditions. The industry can be about a 5% EBIT business. It's very different to potentially financial services or pharma industries. The lack of training and awareness around allergens means that customers who are severely allergic must always enter any food service environment, even the ones they go to regularly, with a heightened alertness of risk. There are lots of positives taken from the FIR changes, and the FSA survey actually called out and highlighted that when it was announced some time ago. So although there have been instances, there has been lots and lots of improvement, and because I'm out with my daughter, I experience it every day. However, I think that at every level we need to, from the food chain, we need to create a sustainable model that ensures constant reduction of instances and reduced fatality. And as Renee said in terms of incidents today, we can't necessarily eliminate, but we can minimise. I suppose in terms of the business that we have from Gather and Gather, how do we manage allergens? So, it is for us not only about the points that are in the board here, but I suppose we took a very hands-on approach from when the FIR came up about in terms of everything we do, from allergen checklists, videos, team engagements, the whole thing around Orange Wig and about getting our customers to come and talk to us so we have a dialogue. In the workplace, that's easier. An environment like this, a unique customer arriving, very hard to do that. But I think in terms of where we can get that dialogue going, it's really important. But it's clear that the discussion with customers and their allergens at point of sale is critical. We now have allergen management ingrained into our everyday operating standard. This is from daily menu briefings through to regular audit process. And our requirements provide comprehensive allergen information has flowed down through to our supply chain, where we need reassurances on products that we source, which is a harder thing to do than many may think. And I think in terms of what we've been through today, that's probably very evident to you. What's interesting is that there are a number of companies that are doing some really great work around allergen training, allergen awareness, many people in this room today. But I think it's fair to say, and as from a campaign perspective, and I get it as an operator, to say that sometimes that you have been able to be accredited is, a piece of paper. You know, you are only as good as your last meal. In my view, you're only as good as your last safe meal that you've provided for somebody, and it is inherent on us to do that. So in terms of what you need to do as a business, and again, I speak here generically from a food service as an operator, as a parent, and having some visibility of what goes on. You know, we believe that if you're a food business at a macro level from an allergen strategy, you know, there are some key questions that people need to ask themselves. And these might be really straightforward for people in this room today, but if people don't have the answers to this, they need help from professionals to come in, you know, small to medium-sized players to do that. And I think, again, when you then take it on to the next level and talk about may contain, for us, you know, this involves sourcing, responsible procurement. Everything involves getting to the kitchen door. Transparency in supply chain is key as part of the broader food fraud issue, which is associated, but we won't go there because that's another conference in itself. As an industry, we do not generally currently consider may contain products with our detailed allergen reporting matrix checklists. So it's important to know that. Perhaps advancing this, in terms of we've batted around this internally, you'd end up in an environment like this kitchen where all those 14 allergens are present, and you would have may contain on every single product, which we don't necessarily know is going to be helpful around looking. But what we do have are clear statements, so that if you do have an allergen, and it is serious, say like Hazel again today, we have got the ability to be able to have a nominated person to communicate, to understand what is the process that is going on in that kitchen, so that both us and the customer can make a risk assessment around that. So there's a lot of work to be done around that. We find that wholesalers won't take responsibility for branded second-tier products. You've got to keep it live if it's coming through the supply chain, which needs to work, and there needs to be, again, more collaboration with the supply chain and the food service caterers that need to take that forward. There's also, I think for me as a caterer, a bit of a common misconception, again, we touched on it earlier at the panel, is that the nut allergy is more severe than dairy and egg. I think we often see there's certain nuts that are more common in terms of fatalities and incidents. And it's funny, even with Ella, she actually considers herself lucky that she has a nut allergy and that she's not impacted by wheat, dairy. She said, God, Dad, how awful would that be, going out to eat around how that would be, because she feels it's a little bit more identifiable. However, it's the nut allergies, etc., that we often do see quite a lot of challenges with. So in terms of what are we doing around going forward, and Lynn touched on it earlier around ask the question. I think at the Anaphylaxis Campaign, we've identified that we believe we can make a difference for the food industry. At Gather and Gather, we've been a bit of an early adopter of Ask the Question. So a lot of the material we have in our restaurants is about saying, come and talk to us. And what we have done is look to dial up severely allergic customers on both sides of the counter. As operators, we need to make it easy and comfortable for people to ask the right questions of us. And from what I experience in the eyes of an allergic consumer and hearing about the incidents of near misses, the operator needs to improve the dialogue at every point of sale and asking the right questions. So going one step further to help this risk assessment and thinking about how do you bring ask the question to life, we need to enhance that all-important point of sale conversation. And we've developed a series of key questions that as an operator we will ask and document to a declared allergic customer. This engagement will help us to document exactly what the allergen is, understand the severity of their condition, and provide a specific, real-time risk assessment which will help us make the necessary menu recommendation. And one of those answers may be, it's probably safe that you don't actually eat here today. It's rather better than a hospitality mindset of, oh, we've always got to try and find a way around it, and everyone's hoping for the best, and we feel like we're playing Russian roulette. It will also determine who is severely allergic, who has a food intolerance, or someone who has a chosen certain lifestyle diet, which there are many out there. All scenarios are very important and all need to be handled in their own sensitivity. However, one is life-threatening, and the team operating need to understand that there and then at that point. We will be rolling this out across our business over the coming months, and we are looking to gain broader funding to really turbocharge the campaign, across the industry. And I'm keen to hear people's views on this concept. And I think, you know, back to a couple of points that were being raised earlier, both in terms of Juliet's sort of the text message she put up there, and I think also the point that JP talked about, the understandability, which is a word now that I'm going to use because I think it's a fantastic one. And as Renee said earlier, with allergens, you know, we can never minimise, we can minimise, but we can't eliminate. I think we have to, from a food industry perspective, and crucial to the UK economy, and we've talked today about funding, that the government does need to support one of the biggest employers, one of the biggest contributors, just on the back of VAT and around GDP and around the brand, and food in this country is a very strong brand. However, as an industry, we all do need to come together to help ourselves. And I think having the great brains trust that's in this very room and through our extended networks, we could do much more. I know that Lynn, in closing, has written to many people on the corporate panel around the Ask the Question campaign, looking for some funding earlier in the year, of which we didn't do particularly well at all. And we are looking for circa 50k. So out of an industry that's the fourth largest and employs 3 million people, the amount of members that we have out there, I kind of would like to think whether any of this has kind of resonated with anybody in this room. And if everyone hasn't got any deep pockets here, then maybe they know somebody that has. But I think just from a brand food Britain, which we've got to start focusing on more around how we have a good responsibility, I think it's something that we are really, really keen to land. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Barry. A question for Barry?
As part of the campaign, would you actually look to make another film like the Take the Kit? Is that part of the idea?
That's exactly what we want to do. So in terms of the impact of that film, which would need to be shaped in a slightly different way, we are looking for something that would have that type of impact, that would try and get the connection for the people that haven't, as the room, seen an anaphylactic reaction and know how catastrophic it can be, that will help educate people who fundamentally are on the front line, but are also in the boardroom.
Just to add to that, I mean, your point about the effect it has not just on the sufferer, but on the people in the organisation, the people who have caused this catastrophe. That seems to me a quite important part of it that is not usually covered.
Well, it is, and I think in terms of what you've ever experienced of someone that's gone through it, through maybe some quite naive ignorance around a situation, or a language barrier, or I didn't quite understand. You know, as food business, you know, we have a responsibility to give these people the tools at the front line, because we don't want people going through that experience.